Come along with us as we take a little detour from our normal format and take the scenic route. Our destination? The little-known prisoner of war camp that held high-ranking Germans during World War II. It now lies still and empty in the pastures of Bowmanville, but our guide brings its history to life. Listen in as we dig into the drama of the site, daring escapes, riots, and more. Our detours? First, our guide takes us to the reportedly haunted Sarah Jane Williams Heritage Center that features Camp 30 artifacts. And then we move on to the site of Camp X, the notorious secret training ground for spies in the Second World War, often thought to be one of the inspirations for Sir Ian Fleming's post-war James Bond spy novels.
Okay, here we are in traffic.
In traffic!
Who would have thunk it? City of Toronto in traffic. I know everybody talks about LA being a problem, but they clearly haven't sat in Toronto traffic either.
I know. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And apparently our route today for our road trip has a big detour on it because there was a massive explosion on our main highway.
Leave it to us to plan our trip for when there's an explosion.
I know. Well, we just need a little bit more excitement than the average Joe, I think, there, Walker.
So where are we going?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Well, this is exciting.
Okay.
This is what I kind of alluded to on our last road trip. We're going to an abandoned POW camp in Canada.
We have one?
Yeah. Isn't that shocking?
This is going to be really interesting.
I know. I'm super excited. And guess what?
What?
I brought snacks today.
Yay! Yeah. So did I. Great minds. Okay, we made it, Walker. Here we are. We're just about to start our tour with our fabulous guide, Faye. How are you, Faye?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Okay, so what are we in store for today, Faye?
So we are going to walk what is known as the Aaron Hort Trail from the subdivision that is just off of Mearns Road in Bowmanville through to what is known as Camp 30, or formerly the Boys Training School.
Okay.
So Aaron Hort means word of honor in German.
Oh.
And the reason the trail is called Aaron Hort Trail is that when the POWs lived at Camp 30, they would sign themselves out. And if they signed themselves out and went down to the lake to go swimming or somewhere else, they would not try to escape while they were signed out.
Okay.
It is their word of honor.
Their Aaron Hort.
Their Aaron Hort.
Okay.
So we called this trail Aaron Hort as well because the reason we have access here is because we have a license agreement with the private owner of the property to use this trail for these tours.
Okay. And so we must be very respectful as we are on private land at the moment.
Yeah, so stay on the trail, basically, is the message. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, we're in a beautiful pasture-like setting. It's quite idyllic, actually. And I can't wait to see what we're about to discover with you, Faye.
Yeah. We just came over the creek here.
Mm-hmm.
This is Soper Creek. So Soper Creek is part of Bowmanville Creek. It's one of the major tributaries of Bowmanville. So it dumps out into Lake Ontario. Salmon and trout spawning area.
Oh, wow.
The reason that the Boys Training School was located here was because they could, there's two reasons actually. They used this creek as part of their firefighting, and they also flooded some areas in the valley to play hockey and do all those kinds of things.
Right.
So the creek was quite integral, which is why it has this sort of leftover apparatus on the dam that we just crossed.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sort of. What era do you think that's from?
1920s.
1920s. And that's when this site was originally a boys' training school. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Faye, the Boys Training School, when it was started and when it eventually developed into the POW camp?
Yeah, so what happened was that in 1922, the owner of this farm property, very rich man who lived in Bowmanville called John H.H. Jury, went to Toronto to listen to a lecture. He attended a convention. And Alex Edmondson, who was one of the boy mayors of Toronto, spoke at that. And he spoke about how we weren't really treating young people the way that we should, that we needed to give them more guidance. And so there was a whole sort of movement by the provincial government to try to address sort of youth delinquency at that time.
I see.
John H.H. Jury was so impressed by what he heard from Edmondson, he offered to donate his farm.
Oh, wow.
So the provincial government accepted that offer and bought another 150 acres in addition to the 150 that was on this farm.
Okay.
And that's why the boys training school was located here. So the design of the boys training school was designed by provincial architects. There was actually a branch of architects at that point within the provincial government. And it's quite a beautiful site. So we'll actually walk from here up to the top of this little hill, and I'll give you the layout of the campus.
Okay, great. It was quite extensive too, the population, if I'm not mistaken, right? It wasn't small, the training school.
It was built for 300.
Okay.
At the time of the POW camp, it had 800 residents.
I see. Okay.
But we can talk about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that as we go. Okay.
Okay, so now we're at the top of the hill.
Yes. So if you look back towards
The west.
the west, this is where the driveway came in.
Okay.
So it came in from Mearns Road, where you guys came in.
Yeah.
And crossed the creek and then came up out of the valley here.
Okay.
And if I turn the other way, there's a flagpole here.
Right.
Flagpole used to be in front of what was the administration building.
Okay.
The administration building was a large, 2-story, imposing building. And so when the boys would arrive here, that's the
first place Okay. That's what they first saw when they entered the property.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the administration building unfortunately burned in, I believe it was 2010.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of a hole over in there, which is where the admin building.
Not too long ago. No.
No, it was a fire started. There were a number of fires started in the different buildings as part of the vandalism
What a shame.
that has happened to the site over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very difficult to protect an open air site like this when we don't have it really established and celebrated as a heritage site as it should be.
It's not a small site either.
No, it's a very large
so
property.
The area that eventually the developer will hand over to the municipality as a park area in here, which includes many of the buildings, but not all of them, is about 12 acres. There's another 65 acres in the valley, which is part of the floodplain, which they also will have to turn over to the municipality. So it will be a large green space, and as we walked through, you saw there were other trails on the other side of the creek already. So it would be part of the overall green network of Bowmanville.
Oh, beautiful. So it'll really add to the
the
natural beauty of this area.
Yeah.
Okay, and I see a big building in the distance and another few off to our right. So where are we going next, Faye?
Well, first I want to talk about this central area in here. So in this central area, there is an oval road that goes the whole way around.
Okay.
And when the boys' training school was designed, it was designed as a pedestrian environment, right? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't for cars,
right?
Particularly,
right.
The oval road that went the whole way around, the buildings were placed around it. This area in the middle here is called the bowl.
Okay.
And the other buildings that are around were some of the residential buildings for the different boys.
Okay.
And then there's a whole sidewalk system that leads to everything.
Okay.
The building we're looking at is the cafeteria. So the cafeteria had the commanding view over the bowl.
Okay.
Okay.
Lovely. And were the residences, the prior boys training school residences, then converted for the POWs in World War II? Okay.
Yeah, they were converted for the POWs. Plus there was a whole bunch of additional buildings sort of built in that open space that's just over there.
Okay.
So that they could accommodate what went from being 300 to 800. And obviously, because the cafeteria was only designed for 300, they had to have a couple sittings for every meal.
Oh, right. Okay. And was it gated? Did they have to gate it at the time when they converted it to a POW camp, or was it the Einhort Word of Honor system?
No, it wasn't the Einhort Word of Honor. It actually had a fence the whole way around with watchtowers. But the interior of a POW camp is actually run by the most senior officers who are prisoners.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, tell me more about that. That's interesting.
So what the I'll just go back, and what the Canadians were doing was the Canadians would be they were in buildings on the other side of the street, on the other side of Lambs Road over here.
Okay.
In bunkhouses over there, and they would be in the watchtowers, but they didn't go inside
the camp itself.
Oh,
wow. Okay. And the camp itself was run by the highest ranking prisoners.
Yeah. So what were their jobs?
Yeah.
Their jobs were to run the interior of the camp and to, make their own food and do that kind of stuff. Supplies were brought in, but they also, because this was designed originally as being self-sustaining, it was a farm.
Oh, okay.
So even the POWs continued with milking the cows,
and
caring for the chickens, managed the farm, and used the produce from the farm. Other produce was brought in as well.
Right.
And the other job of POWs is to escape.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
One of their primary jobs.
So they, one of the things they had to do was that they had to create proposals of how to escape, and those proposals went to an escape committee, and it was only the ones that were approved that were allowed to proceed.
You're kidding.
No.
An escape committee. But none of the Canadians or Allied forces, would they know about this, or?
They would not know about this, and there were escapes that happened out of Camp 30. Mm-hmm. None were successful.
Okay.
But that's part of the great story that goes on here.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful model at the Clarington Museum in Bowmanville that shows all the different escape attempts.
Oh, wow. That might be a fun place to stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we tell, as we do tours, we tell some of the stories about some of the different escapes. So one of the major ones is the one where the Navy and the Army were in the triple dorm, which is over. You can't see it from here.
Okay.
And they were digging tunnels because it's closest to the road.
Right. Okay.
So they were trying to get onto the other side of the road.
Okay.
And it was a bit of competition between the Navy and the Army.
Of course, as it always is.
Yes. And so what they were trying to figure out what to do to the soil.
Okay.
The one group was putting it in the attic.
Okay, of their dorm.
Yes.
Okay.
The other group was taking it out and dumping it out of their pant legs, things like that, because it was all very maintained.
Yeah. And you couldn't have it showing because you would be noticed by...
Right.
Right, okay.
Right. So then, right before the escape was supposed to happen, the ceiling collapsed.
You're kidding.
No. So that's how the Canadians found out that
about that particular
one. The big thing that happened in the cafeteria was the Battle of Bowmanville.
Right.
Which we want to hear more about.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So the Battle of Bowmanville, that was 1942, and it was after the raid in Dieppe where some of the German prisoners of war were found handcuffed.
Okay.
So they retaliated by handcuffing a whole bunch of Canadian and English German prisoners of war. And it was all debated in both Parliament in England and in Canada. Mm-hmm. But the order that came down was that the highest officers were to be shackled.
Okay.
Okay, so
and that happened here?
Well, this camp, because of how nice it was, is where the highest officers were.
Right.
Okay? So the Canadians were to do that. So they came in and they basically, they would meet with their counterparts, told the German officers that this had to happen. The German officers said, well, we'll take it back to the gang and figure it out. They took it back to the inmates, and the inmates voted and said, no.
We're not doing this.
Surprise.
Yeah, we're not doing this. So what ensued after that was the Battle of Bowmanville. So it's basically they barricaded themselves into all of their buildings, right?
Oh, wow.
And it raged for about 3 days, but the Canadians were quite honorable. They didn't want to take in any type of ammunition or anything like that. So it was fought with baseball bats and hockey sticks.
Oh my gosh. Could
milk
you
bottles.
have a more Canadian battle?
No. Because this had a district heating system that was part of the overall design for all of the buildings, the Germans barricaded themselves in the cafeteria.
Okay.
Early on in the fighting, they decided that the infirmary, which is a hospital,
Right.
which is a building next door and was the general's house, that was neutral territory, and that's where everybody who, had a boo-boo got fixed.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's very civilized.
Very civilized. Yep. Eventually, they had to bring in, because who was guarding the camp were veterans from the First World War who were elderly by then.
Right.
They had to bring in young recruits from Kingston, so that took a while because that's by train.
Yeah.
So it was only in the third day that eventually the young guys got up on the roof of that cafeteria and rappelled down through the windows and finally took care of the whole thing.
That's like out of a movie. And was anybody killed, injured?
No one was killed. There were injuries and there was one shot fired, but no one hurt badly.
That's amazing. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like just without as much strife and violence.
Yeah.
That's quite a story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, where to next?
Where should we go?
We'll go down this way.
Okay, perfect.
So we are now standing in front of what is the gymnasium and the natatorium.
Natatorium. I'm not familiar with that word, Faye.
Swimming pool.
Oh,
Indoor
of
swimming
course.
pool.
I did take Latin. What's wrong with me? Okay, indoor swim. That's very fancy.
It was very fancy. It was probably one of the earliest indoor swimming pools in Canada.
Wow. That's a claim to fame.
Yeah.
And you need that here in our climate.
Yeah.
You can't swim year round.
Sure, you had some happy POWs when they found out there was an indoor pool.
I haven't heard a lot of stories from the POW days of the pool, but I can tell you other stories from people who live here in Bowmanville, because many of us who lived here in Bowmanville as kids learned to swim in this pool.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
So when was it decommissioned? Because it doesn't look like it's much of a community center now.
It's not a community center now, and it couldn't be reopened as a pool because it doesn't actually meet the requirements now of deck area and all that kind of stuff for pools.
Okay.
So when this was still, this was a boys' training school, then in 1941 was taken over by the federal government, operated for 5 years as a POW, and then went back to being a boys' training school.
Okay.
Until 1979. And then after 1979, it became a series of different private schools because it was privately owned after 1979. The provincial government sold it in 1981.
Okay.
But during the 1970s, I can tell you that my brother was a soccer player and they used to play against the boys' training school team. And one of the things they always really liked to do was to swim after the soccer game.
Oh, nice. Have a little refreshing dip?
Yeah. So I've never swam in this pool, but my brother has. Lots of people in Bowmanville learned how to swim here.
That's so incredible.
Yeah.
So it's really an integral part of the fabric of this local community beyond how important it is in terms of Canadian and Allied history.
Yeah. So when it was a boys' training school, when it was first being built, the local Rotary Club and Kiwanis Club sponsored different buildings here.
Okay.
So the jury house, which we haven't seen, it's up around the corner up there, was sponsored by the Rotary, and the other dorm that's just over here was sponsored by Kiwanis.
Okay.
So it was quite a showpiece for Bowmanville. And the gardens were absolutely fantastic. John H.H. Jury, the guy that donated the land, also ran a nursery. He was a pharmacist.
Okay.
So plants relate to chemicals and drugs and all that kind of stuff. But he also ran Brookdale Kingsway, which was a nursery in downtown Bowmanville, right along the railway tracks. His influence on the landscape, we also haven't figured all of that out, but it's very obvious that there was an influence. There's a huge stand of catalpa trees down in the south part down here. There used to be trees lining the whole way around the roadway, but many of them were ash trees, so they've had to be removed because of emerald ash borer.
Yep.
But his influence on the campus is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And if you look at the historical photographs of the campus, it was maintained gardens everywhere.
Oh, gorgeous. We'll have to see if we can locate some of those to put on our social media.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay, so we have the indoor swimming pool.
Yeah, and I'm just going to talk about the design of the buildings for a few minutes. So the buildings are actually designed in what's known as the prairie style, made famous by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay.
He was not involved here, but the architects that were involved from the province obviously knew about his work and had some connections because it's designed in the same style.
Right.
So flat roof, the detailing on the sides, there's little sort of diamonds, oftentimes up near the fascia.
Yep. Yeah, I can see one from here.
Yeah, and so that is the type of design that was done. And the construction of these buildings is actually steel beams
Oh,
and then triple brick.
wow. Was that unusual for this part of the world and the time?
It was new.
Okay. Okay.
It was what was new.
Yeah.
But it's also what has made the buildings continue to be such good buildings, even though they have been abused by vandalism for the last 10 years, 12 years.
They do look very solid. They do look very solid, and their structure and their appeal is still quite visible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Wow. A connection to Frank Lloyd Wright. That should be another feather in the cap of preserving Camp 30.
Yeah. So this is a National Historic Site, and it was made a National Historic Site in 2013, I believe.
Okay.
And it was designated for 3 reasons. The Camp 30 POW camp, the history of boys training schools in Ontario.
Okay.
And also for the type of architecture that it is.
So a three-pronged
Yeah.
reason for it to be preserved. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Jurylands Foundation.
So the Jurylands Foundation was formed up in probably about 2012 or around there.
Okay.
And it was formed by the municipal government in consultation with others of how to establish a not-for-profit corporation that could receive donations and work to try to maintain this site. So the Jurylands Foundation has been working away in the background, but because they don't actually own any land or have access to any land, they've had an issue getting their not-for-profit charitable status.
Okay.
The cafeteria building has now been turned over to the municipality, and because there's an agreement between the Jurylands Foundation and the municipality, they have resubmitted their not-for-profit charitable status.
Okay, great.
So that should be coming through hopefully very soon.
Okay.
And then they'll really kick into fundraising, and the fundraising will be used to secure the buildings and then rehab the buildings. So there has been an overall study done that sets out how this would be turned into parkland and the different uses that you could put into these buildings. They're not advocating that it be a museum.
Okay.
They're advocating much more like sort of the distillery district in Toronto.
Right, of course.
Where you have artifacts within the buildings that are there, but it's very much a used site.
Right. I love that idea.
Yeah.
That would be fabulous here because it's not only, just fascinating, the history and the structures themselves, but it is a beautiful piece of land.
Yeah.
And to have it accessible to the public to really enjoy it, whether it's, for the arts or for retail or dining or whatever, it could really bring a lot of positive things to the neighborhood and to the community and to the country as a whole and the province.
Yeah.
That's
so
so
that's
interesting.
the overall vision
Okay.
for the whole area, and the Jurylands Foundation, which is made up of a number of dedicated people, not all from the Bowmanville area, because we realize that the stretch of this is much wider than that.
Yeah.
And there's pieces of it that fit in with all sorts of people, lots with military.
Yep. The veterans would have an interest in it.
Yeah.
Any history buff would have an interest in it. Architects, all sorts of people.
And the reason why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely, because we are big history
love our
fans,
history.
and we also love architecture. So
Yeah.
this is
So
a
the
special place for
Jurylands
us.
Foundation does have a website. So if you just type in Jurylands Foundation,
Okay, it'll come up.
It'll come up. And obviously the reason that they adopted Jurylands is because of Mr. Jury
Right.
and his history with the site. Because it was hard to figure out, do we call it Camp 30? Do we call it Boys Training School? What
Right.
do you call it?
Yep.
That gave it sort of a neutral...
Yeah, it's actually an excellent choice. And we will definitely put the link in our show notes so that everybody has access to the foundation. And once you have that nonprofit status, hopefully those donations come rolling in.
Well, that's how you found us, right?
That's absolutely right. We found you on the website. Faye, this has been such an amazing tour, so educational, and I've learned so much today that I had never, ever known, not in the history books that I read growing up. So we're very, very grateful for everything you've done for us today. And we look forward to seeing you again, especially when this site is preserved.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't wait to come back.
Yeah, thanks, Faye.
Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, that was totally amazing, Walker.
Well, it was a lot more than I expected, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was. And we learned so much from Faye. She was totally incredible.
It would have been a totally different experience if we had gone there by ourselves. So thank goodness
Yeah.
we were lucky enough to have the opportunity to have Faye
Yeah.
sort of, navigate our way through the property. And she's such a wealth of knowledge.
Is she ever?
Yeah, and we have a bonus.
We have a bonus. We're going to the Museum of Clarington, or Clarington Museum, and Faye is taking us there. We're actually going to follow her there. Apparently, it's haunted. Paranormal investigators have actually verified that it's quite haunted, but it does have a model
Right.
of the Camp 30, and
right.
I don't know. Let's see what we find out.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing a bird's eye view
Yeah.
of the property, right?
Of the whole property. Absolutely.
Anyway,
Okay.
super
Let's
excited.
see what we see.
So we're now at the model.
And we're in Clarington Museum.
So this was the admin building. That
Okay.
is no longer there.
Right.
Then this is the natatorium and gymnasium.
Right.
Okay.
And then this is the Kiwanis house.
Right.
Triple dorm.
Okay.
General's house, infirmary, the cafeteria. And then you were asking about, did they build additional buildings? These were the additional buildings that they built.
Okay.
When they dismantled those buildings, they actually used the materials out of them to build the homes on Veterans Avenue here in Bowmanville.
Okay. All right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then that was the greenhouse and potting shed back there.
Wow.
Industrial arts building, and there were some other buildings as well.
And lots of recreational fields, like
Yeah.
tennis courts, soccer fields.
And then there's all the watchtowers, right?
And there's your double fence that was the whole way around in the watchtowers.
Okay. And then the actual Canadians
stayed
lived
over on the other
outside.
side of the street.
Okay. That's so
This
interesting.
puts it all in perspective, like you said, to
Yeah.
see it from a bird's eye view.
Yeah. And then all of these little wires here are the escape attempts.
Oh, you're
Okay, let me
kidding.
see here.
So one is directly coming out of the administration building.
Yes.
And how did they manage? So that wasn't a dorm at any time, was it? So
No.
what's the story there?
Well, but they were in control of the administration
Oh, of
building
course,
as well,
of
right?
course.
So, a lot of these involved sort of a ruse or something like a ruse, right? So they were playing soccer one day. The guards were watching them play soccer. There was a guy that was painting the fence posts here.
Okay.
I had a ladder, went up over the fence, continued to paint the second fence post on the outside, then pulled the ladder up over that one and painted the fence post on the outside, and
Sneaky.
then threw down all of his stuff and took off.
Oh my gosh, what a sneaky. And then there's two more over the fencers over here.
Yeah, and here's the line where they were trying to tunnel out of this one. Right.
Wow.
Okay.
And was that one of the most involved escape attempts? This
Yeah.
one out of the triple dorm?
Yeah, because this is the one where they were trying to get the U-boat captain out.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Right. Yeah.
So in the meantime, the Germans had actually brought a submarine to New Brunswick.
Okay.
But because we had the Enigma machine by then, the Canadians knew what was happening.
Oh, wow.
So the U-boat captain didn't get out, but another guy did.
Okay.
And he got the whole way there, but by the time he got there, there was Canadians crawling everywhere on the shoreline, waiting for him. So,
and did they ever catch the German submarine who was there to pick him up, or no?
They didn't catch the submarine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, what an intricate plan. It's like out of a novel or a movie.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Well, some
it's
of these
remarkable.
stories that I've told you have actually been...
Yes, I saw that.
They've been used
in films and books.
Yeah.
And what is this outside? Is that related to Camp 30?
That is related to Camp 30 as well.
Oh, okay.
So this little log cabin that's here, it used to be out at the grounds at Camp 30. The POWs actually built this log cabin as a sort of an exercise of how does one build a log cabin.
Right, okay. That is so neat.
Yeah.
Well, it's so amazing to see that it's been documented so well and so close by. So if you are in the area and on one of your tours of the site, because we do strongly recommend that you have a guided tour and you don't access the land on your own, because it is privately owned. You can also come to the Clarington Museum and see the model, see the model of the escapes actually created by a POW as well.
Puts it more in perspective for sure.
Well, thanks for bringing us here, Faye. You have really outdone yourself. This was an amazing little detour, and I can't wait to bring my family back.
Good.
So we'll be in touch soon.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Faye.
Thanks a lot. Well, that little visit to Clarington Museum was fabulous. And when we were in the museum, Faye was saying that there's like 40 POW camps in Ontario or in Canada. I think in Ontario, she said. And some of them were not nearly as nice as Camp 30. She said some of them were converted lumber mills that were not
Suitable for winter
living. So the prisoners of war there really suffered. And there were even prisoner of war camps in Alberta, New Brunswick, all across Canada. And I don't think people really realized that was the case. I mean, most people probably thought that those camps would be in Allied territory in Europe.
Right.
So
what's our plan?
I think we're going to go and head to the site of Camp X.
Ooh.
Yeah. The intelligence and spy training facility.
An espionage site, right?
Yeah, from World War II. And apparently, if you go down to the shore there's a big memorial, but if you go down to the shore there, you sometimes can see artifacts that have been washed up. So we're going to go mudlarking. Do you remember talking about mudlarking back in our Walk This Way episode?
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Okay, Walker, we made it. Here we are at the site of Camp X, which was a facility for espionage training.
Yeah.
And apparently they trained the Hydra network here as well, which was a communications network between the US, the UK, and Canada. And there were about 500 plus people stationed here at Camp X.
Incredible.
Isn't that amazing? And we're looking out over Lake Ontario. And apparently when they demolished the site, which is kind of unfortunate that they did, they've just pushed it all into Lake Ontario.
Right. And Ian Fleming.
Yeah.
Ian Fleming was trained here.
Ian Fleming, who, if you don't know, is he Sir Ian Fleming?
I think
he's Sir Ian Fleming. He trained here, and he was the author of the James Bond
series.
Mm-hmm. And some say that his inspiration came from his time here at Camp X.
That's right.
Which is pretty phenomenal. So what are we going to do next, Walker?
Well, first of all, I just want to describe for people here how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
It's on this grassy area, this monument really, and there's some beautiful flags that you can hear waving above us, and looking out over Lake Ontario. It's
gorgeous.
a spectacular view with many walking trails, and
it's really
worth the time spent here for sure.
I think it's called the Waterfront Trail and located in Whitby. I don't know if it extends to other localities, but it's quite beautiful.
Now let's see if we can take a peek and get down to the water.
Yeah, and why do we want to go to the water, Walker?
Because apparently there are remnants from Camp X that were pushed into the water. You can find ceramics and maybe even some barbed wire and other debris from the time. I tell you,
Let's go
the
mudlarking.
archaeologists and us are going.
We're going.
Okay.
Can't wait. Okay, we're down on the beach of Intrepid Park mudlarking. This is my real first mudlarking experience.
Yeah.
It's noisy because it's windy and the waves are doing their thing.
But I have to say, the breeze is so beautiful. It cuts down on the heat, and nobody's here but us.
Yeah, just us and a flock of seagulls.
Yeah.
Not the band.
Yeah.
But a huge flock of seagulls. And we're looking for remnants or evidence of Camp X, because apparently
we're looking for...
they're found pretty regularly.
ceramics and barbed wire.
Yeah.
And mind you might have found a brick.
We may have found, a brick,
And I think a cinder block.
a cinder block, and maybe it's a stretch, a roof tile.
Yeah.
But look at that beautiful green stone down there.
There's some pretty beautiful stones here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're entering seagull territory.
Ah.
This could be something like out of the movie The Birds. Who knows? All right, Walker. Well,
Shall we head back?
let's wrap it up and go get some lunch.
I don't want to leave. It's so beautiful.
I know. It is
You
gorgeous.
can feel the stress, just like
I know.
the shoulders are coming down.
Yeah, it's good.
Let's go fill our stomachs.
Sounds good. We learned so much today and saw so much, and that's such a beautiful part of our province.
A treasure, actually, a historical treasure.
Yeah.
I was really surprised by were some of the little anecdotes that Faye told us, particularly about the fellow who grew up in the area.
Right.
As a child.
And remembers the camp when it was in operation.
That's right. He remembers seeing lines of POWs and really being afraid. You know, this is World War II. There was a lot going on, obviously, and a lot of fear. And to have POWs essentially in your backyard would have been, you know, a big deal, a lot to process as a little guy. And his father told him not to be afraid of them. And he remembers the POWs coming by and actually patting him on the head.
Wow. Isn't that so amazing?
I know.
Probably because they missed their families at home too.
Absolutely.
And she did say that there is a distinction, like not really technically were all of the POWs Nazis.
That's
per
right.
se.
German
They were
soldiers.
German soldiers who perhaps maybe were not part of the Nazi party.
Right. So I think there's some subtleties.
There were some subtleties
in
there
the
that I
subject
didn't really understand before.
Yeah, me as well. And also that was a really interesting little tidbit of information that Faye gave us as well of the dress of the POWs while they were there at Camp 30.
Right.
They wore clothing that had a red circle on the back, right? So that they could be identified.
Easily
as
identified.
POWs.
Right. She also mentioned a funny little story about two prisoners who were out on their leave that they got to be trusted out on leave, and they were out cross-country skiing, and they came across a woman who had gone in the ditch with her car, and they pushed her car out of the ditch. So there are these real kind of like human stories that can be told about living side by side. And apparently a lot of the prisoners of war came back to settle in the area.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Something that I would never have expected. What a day of discovery.
It's been so fabulous, and I cannot wait for our next road trip. Where are we going?
I don't know.
I know. We gotta figure it
Time
out.
will tell.
Time will tell on the Scenic Route with Harris and Walker.
Thank you for joining us at Home and Abroad with your hosts, Harris and Walker. If you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our show. It helps us grow and expand our reach. Subscribe to follow us each week as we continue the conversation. You can also say hi to us on Instagram at Harris and Walker. We would love to hear from you.